and ultimately post. We're going to be recording this session and ultimately posting it on the Brookland Civic website. So if anyone has a problem with being recorded, you may want to excuse yourself now, but please don't. And why don't we go ahead and get started? My name is Caroline Petty. I am president of the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association. Why don't we just quickly go to the other officers that are part of the association now, starting with Kathy Jackhart, who is my Zoom technical assistant and also secretary of Brookland Civic. Hello, everybody. And Fred, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yes, I'm Fred Jackson. I'm the at-large member for the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association.
And Renee?
I am Renee McCray. I am the member coordinator of the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association.
And I don't think anyone else from the Officers Club is here. So we'll get started into the guts of the meeting. As I think you probably know from the invitation that was sent out, tonight's meeting is going to be devoted to the subject of the proposed development for the corner of 9th and Monroe Streets in Brookland. But before we get to that, we're going to start off with Melissa Littlepage. Melissa works in Councilmember Zachary Parker's office, and she's going to give us an update and an overview of news and events from the council member's office. Take it away, Melissa.
Thanks, Caroline. Appreciate it. Hello, neighbors. Good to see you all on this Tuesday evening. I am your neighbor. I live close by near the Langdon Park pool across Rhode Island Avenue. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Councilmember Parker's communications director. Happy to bring you updates from our office tonight. Want to start just by saying that we know neighbors are feeling a range of emotions following last week's election. And our office is committed to continuing to representing district neighbors and ensuring our right to self-governance. The mayor is proactively reaching out to the president-elect to ensure a peaceful and safe transfer of power. And our office is coordinating with the mayor's office and the office of the attorney general, again, to ensure that neighbors are safe. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. I'm going to put my contact information in the chat before I hop off. And of course, we will continue to provide updates to neighbors as we receive them through the council members' weekly newsletter. I will also provide information about that in the chat before I hop off. A few updates pertinent to Brookland. Our office is still in talks with WMATA about the Brookland Metro joint development. There are currently two sticking points, if you will. One is about the percentage of affordable units in the development, and the other is about future revenue benefits and where those go. We know that these are two things that are priorities to Brookland neighbors, which is why we are continuing to be in talks with WMATA about them and continuing to advocate on neighbors' behalf. Unfortunately, we don't have any more updates beyond that to share at this point, but we are still in talks with WMATA. We are excited to see that the Trader Joe's near Brookland, also Edgewood, there's a little bit of back and forth there, is going to be coming online soon. We see that things are moving along there. We, of course, are always advocating for more access to food and to grocery options for neighbors. So we're excited to see that that's going to be coming online soon. You may have seen that the council member has been advocating on neighbors' behalf with regards to the Giant grocery store in Brentwood, which for a time had been prohibiting baskets and bags from being brought into the store. We've been in talks with Giant corporate and regional leadership on neighbors' behalf. And fortunately, at our most recent meeting, have been able to secure that neighbors can bring baskets and bags, including backpacks, no larger than 16 by 16 by 4, which they assure us is a standard size of backpack. If you continue to experience any issues, please be in touch with our office. We have a direct contact now that we can flag these types of issues for, and we will do that on your behalf. Also wanted to just flag that WMATA has released their Better Bus network. They've given initial approval to this final plan. We're really excited to see that they've incorporated some of our Ward 5 bus network task force recommendations. You might remember that the council member convened this task force both in 2023 and 2024 to review WMATA's proposals and develop comprehensive feedback on how this network would impact Ward 5 neighbors. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, you can head to betterbus.wmata.com and review the maps. We'll be giving some of our analysis of it later in this week's newsletter on Friday evening, so you can keep an eye out for that. But we are excited, especially to see things like connectivity from Ward 5 all the way into downtown being restored, connectivity for senior residents, especially in Fort Lincoln, being restored. This is all very important for Ward 5 neighbors, so happy to see that happening. Couple more things. Our office has requested a meeting with DPR and DGS for an update on their Ward 5 projects, including improvements at Turkey Thicket Recreation Center. Councilmember Parker just did a walkthrough at Turkey Thicket this past week with DPR and DGS to ensure that what we're hearing from neighbors about certain repair issues needing to be taking place are actually on track and taking place. We've also heard from neighbors about the need for rec centers to be open on Sundays, and that's something that we're pushing for as well. Update about our turkey giveaway. It unfortunately or fortunately is full. We have no more available turkeys. So if you were hoping to get one, we're directing neighbors to Bread for the City's Holiday Helpings program, which is very generous. But our holiday giveaway, we've now reached the maximum. If you are interested in helping us distribute turkeys on November 20th, we would love your help. We're going to need your help. So please be in touch with us if you'd like to help out with that. And please mark your calendars for the council members' Ward 5 holiday party, which will be on December 19th from 6 to 8:30 at Dock 5 in Union Market. This is where we will also have the Ward 5 awards. And nominations for that will open this week in the newsletter as well. We hope that you will take time to nominate a Ward 5 neighbor who you think has really poured back and invested in this community. So please, again, keep an eye out in the newsletter for that nomination form so that you can nominate your neighbors for a Ward 5 award. I think that is all I have for now. Of course, there's always many, many updates. And as someone who spends a lot of time on the newsletter every week, I'm tempted to give you all of them. But if you've ever read that newsletter, you know it's a labor of love. So I won't go into all of it here. I'm going to drop my contact information in the chat, and please be in touch if there's anything that you have questions about from our office. Thanks so much, Caroline. Appreciate the time.
Cut that down.
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate the update. Okay, so let's go ahead and delve into this evening's topic. The latest proposal for development at 901 Monroe Street. I want to give a little bit of history by way of context for tonight's discussion, because this isn't the first time that we're hearing about this project. The discussion of the project actually began over 10 years ago. There was a similar proposal at that time for the same site brought by the same development team. It was a similar proposal, and it involved a planned unit, mixed use, residential, rental development, also with an associated zoning map change. And it was brought to the zoning commission for approval. So that was something like 13 years ago, I think. It was quite controversial, to say the least. It at the time, it came not too far beyond the heels of the new development at Catholic University, on the Catholic University Monroe Street Market side of the tracks. And so it would have been a very new thing for Brookland's first planned unit development, for instance. And as you might imagine, some in the neighborhood loved it, and some hated it. In any case, it was very hotly debated at the time, including within this civic association. We were very much involved. And ultimately, a final package was delivered to the zoning commission, and ultimately approved by the zoning commission. But that proved not to be the end of the story. A legal challenge was brought to the zoning commission's approval by the 200 footers. That is the people most directly adjacent to the proposed project, who were very concerned about the extent of the zoning changes that had been approved. And the extent of the change from what had been, for as long as they had lived there, a low-density residential neighborhood that now was going to be, the density was going of a project right next door was going to be changed significantly, and concerned about the effect that was going to have on their quality of life. So they filed a lawsuit, a legal challenge, and I think probably to everyone's surprise, the legal challenge was successful, and they prevailed. And they prevailed not just once, but ultimately 3 times. The case went over the course of a number of years. The case went back and forth with the zoning commission and the developers making changes to the package to accommodate the court's concerns, but the court rejecting those, as I say, 3 times, until ultimately everyone agreed that the package should simply be vacated. And that brings us to where we are today. That brings us to where we are today with, it's been 10 years, and now the development team is coming forward with a revised package. There have been some changes to the comprehensive plan and the future land use map, which potentially enable the revised changes. And so we're going to hear about them today at this meeting. And the way we're going to work it is, first, we're going to hear from the development team, which consists of Horning, the Menkiti Group, and the proprietor of the old Colonel Brooks Tavern. Nod your head if I'm correct on that, if you would, Paul Tummins. Is Jim Stigman still involved?
Yes, but not on a day-to-day, not on a day-to-day matter.
Okay. So we'll hear from them first, the development team first, and then we'll hear from the 200 footers. It's a new, some of the same old people, but there are some new people in the mix now as people have moved away and moved on with their lives. But these again are the Brooklanders who live closest to the proposed project. They're the ones going to be the most directly affected. And they have already met several times with the development team, and with their ANC commissioner, who is Ra Amin, who has very ably facilitated communications between the development team and the 200 footers. And so I've asked them to come and share their reaction to what they've heard thus far. The way we're going to work it is, what I'd like to do is each set of parties will have approximately 15 minutes to speak and share their presentations. I would like the audience to hold questions until both parties have had an opportunity to speak. And then please raise your hand if you have a question. The chat just gets too complicated, especially if people are writing lengthy chats and we're trying to distill. So please, we're going to call on you so you can ask your question, not give a speech, but ask your question as cogently and concisely as you can, and direct it accordingly. And that way we'll try to take as many questions as we can. If we don't get to you, and we'd like to hear from actual members of the Civic Association first. And then if there's time, from people who aren't members but are on this call because they're interested. We'll try to take as many questions as we can. And if we don't get to your question, or you don't want to ask it personally, please put the question in the chat. We'll consolidate what we get and send it to the parties and hopefully get responses and then distribute those responses. And then finally, just so you know, we're not going to be taking any votes tonight or passing any resolutions on this project. Tonight is a night to listen and learn. And so with that, let me go ahead and turn things over. I think, Mr. Walters, you said you were going to be leading the conversation here?
Yeah,
Mr.
maybe-
Tummins will start.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Carolyn.
Could you
And
introduce your team? If you
that's what I was gonna do. I'm gonna do
Okay.
the introduction, get it all thing, and then
Okay.
thank you very much for that introduction in the background. I think that was very helpful. And we are prepared to make our presentation in 15 minutes and really we're here to listen to what the Brookland Neighborhood Civic Association has to say, and then to move forward with this project. And really what I'd like to start with is that we are still early in this process. This is a process where we just filed the application. Hope everyone can still hear me. Just filed the application yesterday, which means that we will likely have a public hearing before the zoning commission in the second quarter of 2025. So spring of 2025. So I think, as Carolyn said, there is the opportunity for people to raise questions. We're here to hear those concerns, and then to continue to move forward with both BNCA meetings, ANC meetings with Commissioner Ra, and then the ultimate public hearing before the zoning commission. Members of our team who are here this evening are Peter Conway from Horning, Mark Rengel from the Menkiti Group, Maurice Walters, and Ting Gullick from Maurice Walters Architects. And so now I'll ask Maurice to walk through our plans, and then we're available to answer any questions that you may have. Maurice?
Hang on, I'm bringing up the drawings. Okay, can you guys see the drawings?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So here's the site: 9th, Monroe, 10th, and Lawrence Street. We front on the Monroe Street corridor. It'll be a nice kind of opportunity to stitch together the development that's occurred at the market and then tie that all the way back to 12th Street. You can see you have kind of the commercial buildings, and then our building fit in here. Then further on, we have schools, churches along the Monroe Street frontage. It's not the full site. The back corner has the townhomes back there. So with that kind of overview, I'm going to give you a walk around the site with some renderings that we've done of it. So starting here, we're at 9th and Monroe, kind of elevated opposite the metro station. Sorry, I forgot to bring on the site. Another really important piece is we're directly across the street from the metro station. So the site has great access to transit. It's an important piece of it. So looking from metro across, we've pulled the building back to create a new ample sidewalk on Monroe Street, and we've got some close-up views that'll give you a sense of what that looks like. It is residential. The ground floor here will have the lobby and some of the amenities of the lobby. Then you'll see we'll have some ground level access units here to activate Monroe Street. Then as you go down 9th Street, the building's arranged with a series of courtyards to kind of create 3 fingers of the building, soften the massing on 9th Street. It is a 6-story building, 75 feet tall. The front is articulated in a series of kind of 4 bays that are then actually kind of minorly subdivided into 2 each. And then there's a series of balconies. The primary facade materials are brick, with a couple colors with some interesting detailing to kind of articulate it. Moving down close from that view, here we are right at the front door to the building. This is the entrance into the lobby. And I talked about we've set the building back significantly to create wide sidewalks. The building then does cantilever out a couple feet up above with those bays that we just saw that goes the full way up. We will be putting in new street trees, new streetscaping on Monroe Street. Moving down to the opposite corner by 10th, we have a series of these direct access kind of loft units that will have their own little stoops where they can go out and go out directly to the sidewalk out there. And that'll, we think, will be really important to help kind of get some activity on the street. Then stepping back across the street on the other end, this is at 10th, you just get a sense of the other end of that building with those individual entries along Monroe. And then also you can kind of get a sense of how the building scale fits into the other buildings on the other side of the bridge farther to the west. Turning around and kind of heading down 10th, this is as individual loft units. It turns down here. There's ample landscaping. Another thing we've done working with DDOT is continued the pattern of the stone walls that you see in front of the townhomes on 10th Street. We're continuing that down to this point in front of our building to kind of get the streetscape to fit in. Again, we have the brick detailing. Another important thing is as we go around to the back of the building, we have stepped the building down to 5 stories, down 1 story, and then the building will terrace back, and that 6th floor, the 6th floor is kind of basically concealed behind the parapets, and then you're starting to get a glimpse of the townhomes down there. And moving farther back on the site, you can see those stone walls. We're picking up kind of that character of the existing stone walls and bringing them down, using them to create the border for the little door yards or front yards at the apartment. And then you see the adjacent townhomes here. Okay, as we move down 10th, just turning around, you've got the existing townhomes in the foreground, and then you see the building turning back away from 10th Street, and then you get a little bit of a sense of that setback at the 6th floor, and then you see the building back across the public alley in the rear. Turning around onto Lawrence, kind of heading towards back towards 9th, you see the townhomes turning around. You do see there's an existing public alley access on Lawrence Street here. We are widening it to use that as alley access to get into the building too. So we'll have a new wider or an existing alley will be widened going into the site. Then back here on Lawrence, we've even stepped the buildings down further and configured it with a series of 4 bays, something reminiscent kind of a DC row home. So we'll have 4-story bays, and then those will step back with a terrace, the 5th floor, and then we step back yet again at the 6th floor to kind of soften the massing back on Lawrence Street. Looking down the new alley, so about half of that is the existing public alley, and then we're doubling the width of it to create a larger alley going back for access to the both for access for the existing residents as well as the new residents to their parking. Moving down to the corner of 9th and Lawrence and looking back, again, you get a sense of how we've really kind of worked on that facade to kind of soften it, give it that 4-story bay massing, and then that steps back to 5 stories and then up to 6. So hopefully kind of making a nice transition to the residential areas back on Lawrence. The green, the sidewalk dips down there, the existing grade, and then turns around and heads back to Monroe. Again, lots of kind of traditional kind of front yard, greenscape or dooryard in front of the building. And then you're starting to see those series of courtyards on Ninth. Sorry, I went the wrong way. And then kind of completing the walk around, we've kind of got almost back to Monroe. And here you are kind of from the street. You can get a sense of the new sidewalk with the new landscaping, and you're kind of looking up and seeing into one of the courtyards up there. So again, there'll be lots of landscaping down here. There will be apartments to activate the street. And that is, that kind of completes
Maurice,
the drawings.
Maurice, could you tell us the number of parking spaces, number of residential units,
Yeah,
and kind of
yeah.
the breakdown of the residential units?
Yeah, we will have, let's see, 232 apartments in the building, and we'll have 54 parking spaces under the building. The building will be a mix of a studio. It'll have some amount of studio units. It'll have 1-bedroom units, 1-bedroom dens, 2 bedrooms, and then we are committing to 5% 3-bedrooms. So that's about 12 total 3-bedrooms. So we will have some larger units within the building too.
Great. Thank you, Maurice. So that concludes our presentation, and we're available to answer any questions this evening.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go now to the 200 footers. Who's up first?
That would be me. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, good evening, President Petty, all the members of the Brookland Civic Association. My name is Jamila Minix, and I have been selected to make the presentation on our behalf tonight, on behalf of the 200 footers. If you all don't mind, I jotted down some thoughts, and I think it will be less than 15 minutes, but I think this is the best way to sort of put forward all the hard work that the 200 footers have certainly put in to thinking about this project. Can you hear me okay? Oh, okay. All the hard work that we put into certainly considering this project and our objections, our problems with it, and the things that we would like to see. So if you'll allow me, I'll just read what I have jotted down. In a different universe, there is no Brookland, no old Victorian homes lovingly restored because they've been knocked to dust, no green space where children play outside because they have been concreted over. There are no block parties or beautiful azaleas in the springtime, no neighbors sharing a meal, no farmers markets, no businesses on 12th Street. There is no Annie's Ace. Our historic churches are gone. There are no schools, no civic association, no, because in a different universe, a highway has destroyed this place. In such a universe, whatever remains is whatever remains, overshadowed by concrete and never-ending cars and the exhaust they produce. It was what was supposed to happen here in the 1950s and 60s when the North Central Freeway was slated to run right through our neighborhood because there was no, quote, substantial relocation of persons, loss of taxable property, and disruption of neighborhoods that would result from construction of the Northeast, North Central, and Northwest freeways proposed in the 1959 plan, end quote, according to a study released by the Kennedy administration. No substantial relocation of persons. There were thousands of people in Brookland who, however, that held a different opinion, because there were thousands of people who stood to be displaced if the highway project moved forward. These were people who were not only residents of our neighborhood, but who took seriously the responsibility for being advocates and stewards of this place we call home today. Today, there is no highway running through Brookland because of their leadership and their stewardship. This is why we, the 200 footers, come before the Civic Association this meeting as today's responsible stewards for this corner of Washington, D.C., where we have settled. We are parents, civil servants, friends, homeowners who live here and love our neighborhood. I personally bought my home because I could hear the swish of the leaves in the fall breeze, and I loved that this area had a homey feeling I could not find anywhere else in DC, and that at the time, the elders were so welcoming to me. Like all the 200 footers, this is my chosen home, and like many of us, this house is my first home purchase. When this development was first slated in 2011, it was the neighborhood elders who fought the fight for reasonable development all the way to the DC Court of Appeals, and they won. Many of them are gone now, and I am proud of their stewardship. Now that it is our turn, what a tragedy it would be for one generation to fight off a highway, another generation to win the right to reasonable development, only to have the next generation, our generation, give away the store. The 200 footers have picked up that mantle. We have had meetings among us, considered discussion about what is coming and what is at stake. These are the top of our concerns, and for the record, we're happy to submit our complete list, but in the interest of time, I thought that these were the things that we should most focus on. We submit these with the caveat that several past meetings on 901 Monroe have either been abbreviated because the meeting agenda is stacked with too many other items, or we have sought answers that are not forthcoming or shifting from the development group. In order to be responsible stewards, we are entitled to information to include access to the drawings and plans prior to and outside of these meetings, as well as a meaningful opportunity to be heard on this project that will permanently impact our use and enjoyment of our properties and life in this neighborhood. Construction. As I mentioned, many of us are first-time home buyers and some of us are longtime homeowners. We are all concerned about potential damage to our homes from the construction and the accompanying equipment. These are small streets, not consistent with the renderings that have been shown here tonight. And to date, the only ingress and egress point that has been discussed is an alleyway on Lawrence Street. How will the developers ensure that our properties, which are directly adjacent, will not be damaged? And what is the plan for if damage occurs? Construction parking is also a serious concern. Not only the construction vehicles, but where will the workers be parking their vehicles? And many of us either work from home or have small children at home or both. Noise is a serious concern for those of us who chose this neighborhood because it provided a sense of peace not available in many places in Washington, D.C. How is it possible for the development group to provide a certain quiet enjoyment of our neighborhood when this construction will be ongoing for years? And what is their plan for occasions when our quiet enjoyment is interrupted? The building. There are a number of issues with the building. And first, I'd like to say a little bit off script, the rendering that we've seen just this evening is not the same as the rendering that we have been shown on prior occasions, which goes back to my original point about not having meaningful opportunity to review the information before we're asked to make decisions about it. The neighbors are concerned about the height. We have been repeatedly told that by the development team has the right to build up to 90 feet, but per their letter dated September 6th, 2024, quote, the property consists of approximately 60,000 square feet of land area and is currently vacant. The property is currently in the MU3A and R2 zone districts, and the applicant proposes to pursue a related zoning map amendment to the MU5B zone district for the property. The property is located in a medium-density residential, moderate-density commercial area as designated on the Comprehensive Plan's Future Land Use Map, or the FLUM, end quote. Several things about this. First, the correspondence does not support a current entitlement to build to 90 feet, as the maximum height for an MU3A building is 40 feet. While the maximum height for our R2 zone district is 90 feet, it is our understanding that R2 zone districts are intended for areas with semi-detached dwellings and to protect them from areas from invasion by denser types of residential development. The R2 zone is intended to provide areas predominantly developed with semi-detached houses on moderately sized lots that also contain some detached dwellings, which that does not appear to be this project. Even if the zoning map amendment is approved for an MU5B zone district, it is our understanding that the height allowance for the MU5B is 75 feet, not 90 as has been relayed to the 200 footers. This is troublesome because when we are seeking information, what we are getting does not seem aligned with the reality on the ground. Further, MU5 zoning districts are intended to permit medium density, compact, mixed-use development with an emphasis on residential use, provide facilities for shopping and business needs, housing and mixed uses for large segments of the District of Columbia outside the Central Core, and be located be located on arterial streets in uptown and regional centers and at rapid transit stops. But per the development team, there will be no commercial portion to this project, which calls into question the need for an MU5B zoning district to begin with. Parking and traffic. We have similarly not received information about the development team's plans to stave off residential parking issues and traffic in the area once the building is built and occupied by, for example, offering tenants a transit subsidy or any other solutions to the lack of parking spaces inside the facility. And as another amendment, the building as presented tonight has 54 parking spaces, but we have been told in the past that it will have 58 parking spaces. So that has shifted yet again this evening. Lawrence, 9th, and 10th are small streets. And in addition to the 58 cars, not to mention residents who do not have parking privileges in the building and their guests, we will create an unmanageable and dangerous traffic flow in the neighborhood. And since the alleyway facing Lawrence Street is the only slated ingress and egress point, traffic in our neighborhood will skyrocket, causing an exponential increase in hazard to neighborhood residents who walk and bike, as well as to the several children that live in the neighborhood. The alley is too small for the types of traffic the development team is proposing to include not only construction traffic, but cars, garbage trucks, deliveries, which will all go in and out of an alley that, even if widened, will still be way too narrow to support the volume and size of vehicles proposed to use it. There is an existing curb cut on Monroe Street that can be used for all traffic entering and leaving the building, not unlike the parking lot that exists between Luke C. Moore High School and St. Anthony's, which is only a block away and has an entrance off Monroe Street. We are happy to provide a complete list as compiled by our organization, but our top line concerns are related to both the construction and ultimate development that will be on the property. To recap, concerns about damage to our homes, parking, noise, building height, use of the alley from Lawrence Street as a single ingress-egress point, and lack of any attempt to provide the community with green space or provide anything to improve the quality of life in the neighborhood we love is unfortunate. This comes down to acting as responsible stewards for our generation and the ones who will come after us. What we are seeking is a right-sized solution to the neighborhood. Again, we will provide a full list for inclusion into the record, but some of our proposed solutions include publicly available green space, restaurants and retail in the building, public maker space in the building. Perhaps it is up to the development group to go back to the drawing board again, or simply to provide answers to the questions that we have raised over the course of the past few months. Communication between the development group and the community should be based in trust, and to date, the lack of or conflicting information makes it difficult to build that trust. I shudder to think of what could have happened if Brookland, if the people before us were not mindful of their responsibilities to the future. We as a community cannot responsibly agree to a development for which we have not had a reasonable chance to review the information that impacts us. So for that reason, we trust that the Brookland Civic Association will understand our inability to support this project as it has been presented to us to date. And that is the end of my remarks. I'm happy to take questions. And I know there are other people on here who have questions as well.
Good, thank you very much, Ms. Minix, is it? Minix, yes, thank you for that presentation. Okay, before we get into Q&A, let me just repeat for those of you who maybe joined the meeting after I said it the first time around. The way we're going to take questions is not to go through the chat, but to raise your hand and we will call on you. We would like for at least the initial questions to be from members of the Civic Association. If you are a non-member, but you're here because you're interested in this project, which is fine, if you could hold your questions until after the members have had a chance to ask theirs. And then lastly, one last thing, if you don't want to say your question verbally, you'd prefer to use the chat, you can go ahead and do that. At the end, we will be consolidating all the questions and presenting them to both the 200 footers and the development team. Hopefully they'll be willing to answer them. But with that, why don't we go into questions, and we'll start with, I think I saw Verna Claiborne's hand up first. So we'll start with Verna and then John Leibovitz. Verna, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. But now we can't. You have to take yourself off mute. There.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, I have two questions, and those questions are for the developer. The first one is, does the sidewalk that you all showed and are proposing take up any of the existing roadway of Monroe, which now has been reduced because of the way DDOT has done that street? And the second question is, when you showed your, when you did your PowerPoint, your presentation, you did not show where your trash and recycling site would be. And I want to know whether or not, where that site would be, and whether or not in your plans, after this development is done, if it goes forward, what are the ongoing plans and commitment on the part of your company to deal with rat abatement, because a development that large would create a lot of trash? So those are my two questions.
Well, great. Thank you very much. So with the first question, I will have Maurice Walters. Maurice, do you want to discuss the sidewalk width on Monroe?
Yes, we were not expanding the sidewalks out into the street. Everything you saw was occurring from back of the existing curbs. We worked with those, so there was no expansion to the streets.
So we're not doing anything to reduce the travelway along Monroe Street.
Correct.
Correct. On second, Maurice, do you want to maybe pull up the plans, and we could show probably from that view from 10th Street might be the best way to show where the trash and recycling will be located?
Second. Okay, this is the view from Lawrence looking back up the alley. So back under the build. Oh, sorry, one less bunch. Okay, the view from Lawrence looking back up at the alley.
Yeah.
So at the very end there, inside the building, all of the trash that the residents generate comes down chutes and is compacted and stored inside the building in a trash room. And then the trash collectors will come in, they'll drive down the alley, and they will, the trash will be brought out and they will pick it up and tip it in. And then the bins will be rolled back into the building and they will leave with the trash. So it is all, to answer your question, it's all contained within the building.
And rat abatement?
Maybe that's Peter, do you want to address that?
As Paul may have suggested earlier, we're very early on in this process. We are absolutely committed to make sure that there will be no pest issues, and later that will be something we certainly detail, because we understand that is not something we want for our building or any of the neighbors at all.
Thank you.
Okay, John Leibovitz.
Thank you, Caroline, and thank you to the development team for the presentation, and to Mrs. Minix for the very heartfelt comments, which I thought were very thoughtful. I wanted to just say, so I'm a neighbor. I live a few blocks away. I'm not 200-footer, but I'm constantly traversing those exact blocks that are surrounded by the area, as are many other neighbors, because this is a very special location. It's the literal transit and commercial crossroads of the entire neighborhood. And so I have a few points of commentary and maybe question, maybe they become questions that relate to that. I'll try to be quick and run through them real quick. There's 3 of them. So first, I just want to say I support development of the site, but I think this building is going to be there for decades, right? So it's important to get it right, and that's why I'm saying I have these comments. The first is the lack of retail. The small area plan calls for retail on that block, on that stretch. It's the connector between Monroe Market, and the small area plan talks about a commercial mixed use commercial corridor from 12th Street to Michigan. There obviously used to be retail on that spot. The previous plan had 12,000 square feet of retail on that spot. Now I understand you've done a study that says there's no more demand. I think that's an overcorrection. Markets go up and go down. This building's going to be there for decades. There's a Trader Joe's about to open up, a significant anchor tenant. There's been a lot of development in the area, which is starting to fill up, and there's going to be a lot more demand for walkable retail. So I really think you ought to reconsider. And I would like to think that it's possible to put at least some retail on the Monroe Street, not only as an amenity, not only as for the community, not only for the retail service itself, but also that really does activate the street and help for street safety across from the metro station in a way that I think those loft porches do not. Which brings me to my second point is I think the design is quite, for lack of a better word, introverted. The amenities, everything is very private to the building. There's one entrance to the building on the one corner. There are those entrances on Monroe Street, those so-called loft porches or stoops you call them. I don't envision anybody sitting on a stoop on that busy street facing north in the shadow of the building. I think you have it backwards. I think those entrances should be on the other side of the building, probably Lawrence, so that it has more of a neighborhood house-like feel at the street level. Essentially you have on three sides of the building a wall of windows, which let's face it, shades will be drawn. There's just going to be, it's completely not communicative to the street, which I think goes against basically all principles of new urbanism that we all hopefully subscribe to. So I think that's an easily correctable thing if you move some of those units to the other side and put retail on Monroe. And the third is the car issue. This has come up in every PUD application of all time. I think, there's a balance to be struck between the neighbors' concerns about street parking and the fact that you are directly across from one of the most transit-connected places in the entire city. There are 10 bus lines in addition to the Red Line, in addition to the Met Branch Trail. I think you definitely should explore all the issues of no RPP for the tenants and some transit subsidies. But more specifically, the one thing I want to propose is that you can do up to 50% compact car parking if this PUD is approved by right. I think with a special exception, it could be 100%. Compact car does not mean like a tiny car. It means like a Toyota RAV4. If you look at the measurements, it's a pretty big car. Compact is a term of art. If you would make all the spaces compact, what that would mean is we don't get a bunch of Hummers and big pickup trucks and other things clogging up our streets. And it's been well demonstrated in recent research that those are very dangerous to kids. They have very bad sight lines. I think you would actually have to dedicate less of the building to parking. You might reclaim a little bit for rental space. So I would like to propose that you make 100% of the parking compact spaces, and I would sign up to help get the ANC to support you in that special exception application. So those are my three main points. Thanks for listening, and I'm happy to discuss more in depth offline if there's an opportunity to do so.
Paul or Maurice, do you want to respond now or later?
I'm sure. I think we can respond. I think I'll start on the retail. I hear as I think Mr. Leibowitz raises some really good points. I think we've looked at that, and our concern about the retail space is that because it is not a significant retail space, and because I think originally the idea of the small area plan that there would be a connective tissue between the Monroe Street market and then coming across Monroe, then up to 12th Street. I think what we've seen certainly from the pandemic is that people's views of retail have changed and their use of retail has changed. And I think our greatest concern is that we would design a space for retail and that space would be vacant. That space would not be contributing to the vibrancy of this portion of Monroe Street. And when we look at, certainly at least on the south side of Monroe Street between the tracks and 12th Street, there's not other real opportunities for more retail to come along on that side of the street. Perhaps, if the development of the metro station occurs, I think that is probably a more likely place for retail to kind of thrive and succeed. But I think those are some of our issues, concerns about putting retail in along Monroe Street now. Maurice, do you want to talk a little bit about the activation, the design scheme to activate all of the frontages, street frontages?
Yeah. The idea of doing more of the stoops on Lawrence, I think is definitely something we can look at that could possibly go even further to take those kind of bay windows and those bays that we have and make that a more active street. So I think that's definitely something we could study.
Yeah. And I think similarly, the looking at the more compact spaces.
Yeah.
And just Peter, chiming in real quick, on the retail point, I think, one of our main goals is with the existing retail, we want to support it with existing more further residents in this area, and not compete against it. The last thing we want to do, as Paul said, is add more retail that is vacant, that is competing against other retail in the neighborhood. I agree. I think the idea of more loft units is something we'll explore. I think that is a very good suggestion. We also agree how transit connective this area is. We are, proposing it's 54 parking spots for 232 units, which we think reflects the transit connectivity of the area. And we will definitely explore, as we've indicated in the past, compact spaces to a high degree. Thank you for your comments.
Okay, this is Caroline. I'm gonna take the moderator's prerogative here and ask a question. Two questions, actually. One, I was wondering, this one's probably for you, Paul. If you could respond to Ms. Minnick's point about the 90 feet.
Sure.
Whether that's associated.
Yeah, so a couple things there that I wanted to discuss. So through the PUD process, this is, as we discussed, we are seeking approval of a zoning map amendment to establish the MU5B zone for this site and a planned unit development. So what that means is that the project that we are proposing is the only project that could be built on this site. So while the MU5B zone, when you go to the zoning regulations and you look up MU5B PUD, that could allow a building of up to 90 feet. We are not proposing a building of 90 feet. We are proposing a building of 75 feet. So for this site, if the zoning commission approves our application, we can only build to the 75 feet. We can only build the project that we are presenting with the design that we are presenting, with the materials that we are presenting. So the discussion too about, I think Ms. Minnick did a great job of kind of talking about, some of the issues and some of the discussion of how the zoning process works. So to the existing R2 zone and the existing R3 zone, truly those zones are now not consistent with the future land use map designation for this site. Just as Ms. Minnick mentioned, the current designation for the future from the future land use map for the site is medium density residential, moderate density commercial with an emphasis on residential. So the project we are proposing, 230 residential units, a FAR of 4.2 and a building height of 75, we believe fits right into that MU5 proposal for medium density development, which is encouraged near rapid transit stops.
Okay, but just to be clear, there would be nothing, you made the point that if the zoning commission approves the building that you're proposing now, that's the building you would have to build.
Correct.
But to be clear, there is nothing that would prevent you at some future date, say, before construction even begins, let's say you sit on the PUD approval for years, as is happening all over the city. There would be nothing to prevent you from coming back at a later date and requesting a change to the building that will go as high as 90 feet.
We'd have to do this exact same process again. We'd have to go from a modification, and it would be a modification with hearing that would require us to say, this is why we believe a 90-foot tall building on this site would be appropriate.
Except that the zoning commission would have already approved a map amendment that would allow that. So
they would approve a project. And so that's why I want to make sure too is like a map amendment that is also with a consolidated PUD is different than, say, just a straight map amendment that would allow anyone to build within the constraints of that map amendment. When the zoning commission approves this project, they are approving this project. They are saying that the MU5B zone, as I would say, as evidenced through this building you are proposed, is appropriate for this site. You can build this. Just saying our ability to say, like, to have the approval of this PUD doesn't necessarily mean that if in the future it was decided that they want to do 90 feet, you'd automatically get 90 feet. That's not really the case. There would have to be discussion about that. And I saw Ms. Mix, there was your comment in the chat. I agree. It is some of this is the kind of almost say stilted language of the zoning regulations and the parlance. So hopefully my answer helps you understand kind of this process. And I would say too, just to reiterate what I said at the beginning, with the filing of our application yesterday, we've kind of said, like, now that those materials are publicly available. More importantly, I would say that you could get them, hopefully they'll be ready up on the Office of Zoning website tomorrow or the next day. But more importantly, 901monroe.com, which is the website that Horning and Menkiti have established for this project. There is a link now on that website to all of these materials, to these plans. And what we will do is, we really wanted to have kind of like a starting point so that everyone can see the most up-to-date plans. And what we really want to encourage you to do is 901monroe.com. That will be updated there. The community can go to see what is the current status of the plans that will be eventually before the zoning commission.
Okay, let's move to new questioner, Chris Matthews, then Mary Pat Rowan and Michael Lambright. Chris Matthews first.
Hi, one comment and one question. I am concerned about parking and traffic. Traffic is already bad. It's just a comment. I would like to see some kind of a cutaway or driveway for all the Ubers that are going to come by picking up those residents. I can see a lot of traffic problems because people without cars use Uber a lot or have other friends pick them up or have guests. So those are just things to consider. I'd request it, some kind of a cutaway or driveway. That's it.
Mary Pat. Or I'm sorry, did the development team want to respond to that or take it under advisement? Accept it.
Yeah, we absolutely. And maybe another part of this, there's some discussion about it. And part of this process will be not just our submissions, but also submissions of the Office of Planning and the Department of Transportation. Those will come later in late winter into the spring. But I think what part we will do, Ms. Matthews, is we will have our transportation statement, our transportation demand management plan. And as part of that, we can work with DDOT to talk about appropriate signage along Monroe Street there for things like drop off, pickup for ride sharing services. And I think that's a great idea. And we can absolutely incorporate that into our transportation demand management program and work with DDOT on that.
Okay, Mary Pat.
I wonder about the utility lines. I didn't see any picture that showed them at all. Does that mean that they're going to be buried both on Monroe Street, on Lawrence Street, and on 10th Street?
I'll start with Maurice. Do you want to pop up the renderings too? We're going to show them, and then Peter, you want to address that?
As I say, we are not planning on undergrounding those utility lines on Monroe. We have designed, one of the things that Maurice may have talked about is the sidewalk is 10 feet, and that is a portion of it is indoor privately owned property. So we're expanding it to a wide thoroughfare throughout the property. But you can see Maurice's renderings right there where the current utility poles are.
My next question is, why are you not burying the utility lines? That was always the thought when the Monroe Street was developed more recently.
It's something we've looked into certainly, and we are, exploring going forward. But as of right now, it's not in the plan currently.
Mary Pat, we can continue to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very important to the community because you cannot have trees if you have utility lines. We don't want little trees. We want big trees. So we want shade. We have no shade on Monroe Street. I mean, but 10th Street too, your side of 10th Street and Lawrence Street. This is the future.
Thank you, Mary Pat. Michael Lambright, you're next, and then the Kurtz Keller team.
Great, hi. So I have a question for each of the developer and the 200 footers. For the developer, I guess a question in two parts. One, how do you communicate with prospective tenants that they will not be eligible for residential parking permits? Because as I understand it, they won't because of the nature of the building. And then two, about a third of DC residents don't own a car. Given bike and transit access to this building, how can you attract those residents to come to this building so that, parking and traffic concerns are even less of a problem? And then to the 200 footers, we are currently in like a housing crisis. Our region is like hundreds of thousands of units below targets that have been set by our elected leaders. That's driving up prices for rent. That's driving people out of communities. I can understand not wanting the neighborhood to change and to keep places as lower density, but like, where should we build more housing if not in this lot? Thanks.
Paul, I can take that. Thank you for your question, Michael. We've heard loud and clear from the community about the RPP. It's a conversation we're continuing to have about that, and more to come on that. We have, given the site and your point about ownership of cars, we do think that this is, it is a transit-oriented development, and the location speaks for itself with its 10 bus lines, as John pointed out earlier, and proximity to the metro should help attract people there. And yeah, I think it's just a fantastic transit-oriented location that should help renters move there.
Yeah, and Peter, one thing I would say too is that Michael, the rent for the rental of units and rental of parking spaces are broken up. So so if someone is looking to come to this site, and they don't want to have a car, they know that they don't have to pay any rent for a parking space.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, there was a question for the 200 footers real quick about the additional rental units, and we certainly are not opposed to the city building more affordable housing. One, we have to consider that there are rental units right across the train tracks. There's a stalled project at Reed Street. The rental units across the train tracks are not nearly at capacity. And so I'm not sure that we are looking to 911 Monroe to be at full capacity. But I mean, I think that that's more of a question of capacity than it is of actual housing, because we've never opposed development. What we are saying is we want something reasonable because we have to live right next to this building. So I think that I appreciate your question. I think that it's sort of puts us in a posture of being anti reasonable housing accommodation, which is not the case. So I would just say that I would hope that we can all work together to figure out the most reasonable plan and most appropriate plan for this site so we can address the housing crisis. So we're not heartless at all. We want to see people have housing. We want to have a neighborhood where we can all be comfortable and live in an environment together and be responsible, as I said, be the responsible stewards for this land, for this project that's going to be here for probably the rest of our lives.
Okay, I think we should move on to the Kurtz Keller team there, and then to Guy Durant.
Are you ready for me?
No, Kurtz Keller was next. There.
Hi there. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I'm one of the 200 footers, and just since transparency in this process has been one of the difficult parts for us, I was wondering, I understand that you submitted the application. I'm understanding from what you've said that if you're going to make any changes to this project, you have to resubmit that application. So whether that is doing more of the ground floor entry stoops on Lawrence Street, if you are going to take any of the comments from the 200 footers into account, such as building heights, such as addressing the concern about the current alleyway being used instead of an alleyway coming out of Monroe or 9th, you would have to resubmit an application. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I'll kind of give a little bit of overview of the process of from where we are now. So we've submitted our application. The next step in the process is for the Office of Planning to write what is called a set-down memo. It's a memo to the Zoning Commission saying they've reviewed the application and that they will make a decision whether we believe that this case is appropriate to be set down for a public hearing. Prior to that public hearing, we would like the applicant to take a look at 1, 2, 3 things. The Zoning Commission will then have that memo. They will get it approximately 10 days in advance of one of their 2 monthly meetings. So I'm expecting that probably the set down meeting could occur in January of 2025. At that set down meeting, the Zoning Commission says they will review the set down memo. They will say, we agree with the Office of Planning's recommendation. We agree that we want to see those 3 things from the applicant. In addition, we'd like to see maybe A, B, and C from the applicant. The next step is then we, the applicant, will file an updated set of materials. It is that updated set of materials that can address the issues we've heard tonight, can address the issues that we've heard from the Office of Planning, and/or any issues that were raised by the Zoning Commission. So there is then we filed those materials. Those become public. Those become materials that everyone can see. And then from the filing of those materials, the scheduling of the actual public hearing before the Zoning Commission occurs. That typically occurs 2 to 3 months after that. So that's where I'm kind of backing out the idea of if there is set down in January, then this public hearing could likely be April, May-ish. And again, those are just depending on the scheduling, the available dates that the Zoning Commission has. But that gives you, hopefully, that gives you a sense of the timing. And there are opportunities for the applicant to file additional materials at that after set down. And then there's one last chance, 30 days in advance of the hearing, there is the opportunity for the applicant to file any additional materials basically in response to discussions that have been engaged with the community, with the ANC, with organizations like BNCA.
Okay. And then I guess maybe my second question is, why not start with by incorporating the input of neighbors into the initial application? Is it because it belongs in a later stage? But I'm just kind of curious, why not starting with those?
Well, I think that there obviously initial presentations on this showed a curb cut along 10th Street. There were some concerns about having new curb cuts be added to this site. So that was a change that was made from the initial dialogue about this property. So there was some discussion early on about whether or not there should be the activation of Monroe Street. We think we've done that. But I think we also want to say, allow the opportunity for other concerns to be heard. That's what we're doing. And we do have the opportunity to continue to have this project evolve through this process.
All right. Thank you very much. We are going to wrap it up now. What I'd like to do is Rip Preston. You've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you, Caroline.
If you could go next, and then we'll give Guy Durant the last word.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Rip Preston. I was an ANC commissioner 10 years ago when this project first started. The question I have to the team is, was any of those plans or PUD that were provided were used in this project?
So I can start because I was also involved with that 10 plus years ago, Commissioner Preston, as was Carolyn. So some of the things, we looked at, I would say that are not part of that. The number of parking spaces we looked at before, you may remember there was an underground level. We thought that was not appropriate anymore. As there have been, I think people are more accustomed to moving to a place like this, a location like this, and being close to Metro, being close to the bus lines. So there was a part of the project that we decided was not appropriate anymore, having that much parking there, because again, the idea of that having that parking would generate that traffic that maybe we thought was not appropriate now. One of the changes we made to it, yes, there was previously the 12,000 square feet of retail possibility. We looked at that and kind of looked at the current guidance that the brokerage community is giving. So we do not have the retail there. But otherwise, it is a multifamily building on the site. What we do have, we haven't talked about here, as I don't know if we've mentioned at all, is this project will have 15% of the residential gross floor area will be devoted to inclusionary zoning units. So in fact, we'll have more affordable housing in this project than the project that occurred previously.
Correct. And the other question I got, Paul, I'm glad I remember now that you were on that team. Were any of the considerations or concerns that the 200 footers had prior to y'all presenting the new one was taken into consideration?
I mean, I would say, and I'll let Marisha, I think so, because previously there was concern about the styling, the setting back of the building closest to the 10th Street neighbors. I think that we've kept that. That was an important element of this design, is having those step backs closer to those 10th Street neighbors. I think the elements too of having the design of the building along Lawrence Street with the 4-story treatment of those facades coming down. That was something in keeping with the transition from the lower density residential on the other side of Lawrence Street to this.
Okay, thank you.
Guy Durant?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to thank all the 200 footers for, meeting and trying to be thoughtful about this. And as Melissa and others have said, we've always supported some development, just reasonable development. And this one is actually bigger than the previous project, a little more ugly, if I had to compare the two. And some people who are new to this haven't seen the old project, but it actually had, better colors, better, features. So if anybody hasn't looked at the old version of it, I think that should still be on the 901 Monroe website as a comparison, so people can say, hey, this is how it was going to look, and this is the version we have now. But there's pictures out there. We can probably, if you send me an email or contact me at rightguidedc@gmail.com, I can send you some of the previous stuff. So I just find this kind of almost a revenge of the developers kind of thing, where it's like, okay, you didn't like our last design, which was pretty, so now we're going to give you a bigger and uglier version. It's just my raw emotional feel to it. And as far as the comments about housing crisis, I understand that. I'm a real estate agent myself. But some of that is really more about affordability and not about the number of housing, because as was mentioned, there are a lot of vacancies still. And there's other projects that are being developed and are not being filled to capacity because they're unaffordable. And in the last round, we actually wanted more affordable units, and we actually wanted home ownership. Now, if you want to talk about housing crisis, it's actually a home ownership crisis. And I've always asked people to decide, what do you want for the future of Washington? Do you want it to be a big landlord-driven, everybody has to pay rent community? Or do you want a certain percentage of our land to be set aside for home ownership? And I think condos, and we had asked the developer to consider making at least half of these units condo, so that people can own and have equity, which is the greatest, driver of wealth, is when you own your own house. But I think, DC needs to look at that. I know we have TOPA laws and things like that and rent control for older buildings, but they wipe all of that away for new construction. They're not under rent control. I don't even think they're under TOPA. They might be, but the point is that if they had made it more condos and if they had put the retail there, you could adjust the retail to be office space too, because we need more jobs. So if there was like federal office space, because you're right near Metro, and the federal government, even DC government, should put workers closer to Metro anyway. So it doesn't have to be just a residential building. It could have been a mixed use where you have office space as well as retail space as well as residential and condo. I mean, I want people here that buy into the neighborhood and love this neighborhood and stay in this neighborhood. So I'm hoping that we can, at least consider that if you're going to build a building that, is going to be huge, put in some retail / office space, put in condo mix. And I just think that you have to look at all of these options, and the housing crisis is kind of driven because landlords are making more money, and it's going to keep going up. But if you own your property, you can kind of control your costs. So we need to look at, do you want 50%, 70% of housing in DC to be rentals, or do you want it to be homes that are owned by neighbors? So think about that too.
All right. Thank you, Guy. We're going to need to wrap up here. It's 17 minutes after 8. I want to thank everybody for coming, both the audience, but also the development team and the 200 footers for your very, very thoughtful presentations and very cogent presentations, as well as helpful to those of us trying to understand this project. For those of you who weren't able to ask a question tonight, or you think of other questions, I know I myself have thought of at least 5 since I've been sitting here. Please, it's probably a little too late to put them in the chat, but we are keeping those for as long as we're on here. But either put them in the chat or send them to brooklandcivic@yahoo.com. And we will compile them. And will the developers and the 200 footers be willing to respond to them?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. So if you respond, and we can get that out to folks, to all our members, we will do that. This is our last meeting, BNCA's last meeting of 2024. We break for December for the holidays. So our next meeting will be in January. But between now and then, I hope that you'll feel free to contact us, either in person, you know us, you know many of us, or in writing via our email. And if you have thoughts about this project or about what BNCA's involvement in this project ought to be, please convey that to us between now and January, because the officers will be giving that subject quite a bit of thought ourselves. Lastly, I want to remind folks, we do have a cleanup coming up that I hope to see you all at. It's Fort Bunker Hill cleanup. We do it twice a year. This is a twice-a-year event for BNCA. And the next one is going to be before Thanksgiving, Saturday, November 23rd. From 2 to 4 p.m. We meet at the corner of 14th and Otis Street, which is where the picnic table and the kiosk, the Park Service kiosk is. And we'll have bags and gloves and hand tools. But if you have a leaf rake we would appreciate if you could bring those. And we're going to be doing trash pickup, but also in invasive species management. And we'll have donuts and cider. So hope to see you there. Think that's it. Thank you all for coming. And goodbye and good night.
Goodbye, good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Nice meeting, Caroline. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all.